All right, I want to take a quick look at Murfreesboro. This is the Battle of Stones River from Yaquinto Games. This is a Richard Berg design, and 1979 is when this came out. And I know at the time, Berg, I think, was in the process of designing games for the Terrible Swift Sword system, which was the old SPI Civil War tactical system that later became the Great Battles of the American Civil War. But this is not part of that system, so this is probably what I would call maybe an experiment for Berg, where he was designing something different in the Civil War tactical genre, but that was different from that system that he became well known for. So this maybe a little more experimental design. The reviews on Board Game Geek seem to support that. People either kind of like it, and I wouldn't say love it, but they like it or hate it. So as a result, you can usually find copies of this game pretty cheap. I found an unpunched copy from a local seller fairly cheaply. So this is actually the first Yaquinto Games title that I've ever bought. I've played at least one of them before, The Great Redoubt. I've never played, well, maybe, no, I don't remember. The Great Redoubt's the only one that I definitively remember playing. This is a boxed game. Yaquinto was known for having those album games where the games themselves were kind of packaged in these, old vinyl LP album packages where the thing would fold out and that would be your game board. Not the case here. This is a proper box with a fold-out game map, although the box is kind of big and flat. I think something similar in size to like the Labatt games up there. They have the bigger, more rectangular flat boxes, or something like the AWE games. This is a little more rectangular than the Labatt boxes, and a little bit wider than the AWE games. But on the back, you've got fairly bland 1970s style graphics. And the title, Murfreesboro, this is much like Bull Run and Manassas, Murfreesboro was the Confederate or Southern name for the battle. The Union referred to it as Stones River. So the giant Confederate flag in the front seems to indicate more of a Confederate viewpoint, which is sadly the most common perspective of things in the wargaming niche. Usually people tend to idolize and fetishize the Confederates, and nobody thinks much about the Union. I happen to be of the exact opposite viewpoint. I would consider myself a staunch Union man, and the rebels as precisely that, a bunch of rebellious traitors that needed to be conquered. So let's take a look inside the box. I like the Yaquinto logo here, which is just a bunch of Ys in a circle, which kind of gives this cool, almost floral looking or kind of elegant looking logo for the company. And Yaquinto went out of business, I want to say like in the early 80s, not too long after SPI went out of business, and a lot of these niche game companies started folding because they could not compete with the rise of computer gaming and video gaming, and their methods of production were not well suited. This was back when companies would run off 10,000 copies of a game and keep stock, and you'd be able to find them at Sears and Kmart and places like that. That all went away, and now the only place that you can find war games is typically online. Sometimes you can find a couple of brick and mortar game stores that might sell war games. There's certainly none here in the Indianapolis area, and this is not a small metro area, and it's not a desert of gaming. I mean, Gen Con is hosted here every year, but there's just no retail war games presence at all in the entire Indianapolis area. So I have to get all of my war games online. But there's a local vendor, Enterprise Games, which has a website, enterprisegames.com, based here locally. I can usually find good war game titles from him, about to print stuff for decent prices, and I can go pick them up and not have to worry about shipping. But anyway, let's take a look inside. Fairly typical Yaquinto rules here. They are this rectangular style. Got some illustrations in there, but tiny text. It's not focusing very well, but you can see fairly tiny text, much like the SPI rules from the same era. And some nice illustrations. And there's not a lot of the rules. Let's see, it's 9 pages. Wagon reaction chart. That sounds detailed. So deployment setup is on page 13. So the rules essentially end in about 13 and a half pages of rules. And then order of battle, reinforcements, stuff like that. So, not super long rules, although the lengthier, or the rectangular width of this means that they're a little longer than a normal 8.5 by 11 style. So these are the Yaquinto counters. You can see there's plenty of side nibs in here that will have to be trimmed off. They're not corner mounted; they are in fact side mounted, but most of them have get your two side mounted counters. But Yaquinto had these very thick. It's hard to tell here, but very thick counters, and then something unique to this particular system are these brigade counters that are the double wide. Makes me think of something like Musket and Pike, which has the double wide counters, or the Pratt's and Editions Vive l'Empereur system, which is your tactical Napoleonics. So this is the first Civil War game that I've seen that has the double wide counters. So that was one of the reasons that I bought it and was curious to try it. Even if it turns out to be crap. First of all, the game's not expensive. You can find copies for under $30, unpunched even. So that was the main reason I went for the cheaper price, or the game that's a little cheaper. This is cool. There's some ads in here. Little order form. Be curious to try some other. This Time War looks interesting. Starfall looks interesting. There was another one. I've never even heard of the Sword of the Flame. Another one called Mythology that I'm kind of interested in. And then here was like the full color, like fold out catalog. Ironclads is one of the games that Yaquinto is probably best known for, or most well known. But I always like it when the old catalogs are included. It's the Beast Lord. Calendale's playing that right now and struggling mightily with it. But I like the old catalogs and stuff. This is strength logs, fatigues, ammunition trackers. Bird loved that kind of stuff. Brigade strength. Actually, this is more, not even so much Berg, this is more like the Gamers Civil War Brigade series stuff where you're tracking your strength on sheets. Player aid cards, you got a terrain effects chart, and your combat odds ratio, CRT, ranged fire, movement allowance, morale checks. These are identical, nice heavy card stack. And the Yaquinto tray, counter tray that has no top, so they recommend using a piece of cardboard and putting it over the top if you're not going to keep the game laying flat. So I will probably store it flat, but I'm going to use baggies anyway because I don't like the counter trays. Bags, the tiny bags are much easier to sort than the counter trays. Fold the map out. And the map's not huge. but it's on sort of a cardstock, so that serious poochiness. Move it under the light a little bit more. So this is one you would definitely use plexi on. So fairly not. It's not an ugly map, but it's fairly. There's not a lot of color variation, which makes it sort of bland. You've got some terrain there. There's the town, rivers. So this is where the main action will happen along this river here. The Confederates kind of on one side and the Union on the other. And I want to say the Union's like over on this side. So a lot of the fighting will happen in this swath of woods here. I've actually visited this battlefield before. It's not the easiest to get the layout of, but you kind of stick to the river and you can find the main areas of contention. I want to say if the Union's over here, that maybe somewhere along here was where Breckinridge made his fateful charge across the river and got shot to pieces. But not a huge map either. It's only 4 square, so again on kind of a heavy cardstock. So I do look forward to trying this. I'm working on April's Harvest and the CWB right now, so I'll be working on that for a while before I get to this, but I am curious to give it a try. That's Murfreesboro from Yaquinto Games.